The narrow path to the lighthouse twisted along the edge of a cliff, slick with evening mist. Elena moved carefully, the roar of the ocean a constant rhythmic warning far below. Overhead, gulls wheeled against a deepening sky, their cries thin and plaintive. The postcard's coordinates pulsed in her memory, each step a silent echo of its time. The lighthouse came into view as twilight settled, a tall, weathered tower of stone and steel. Its once bright paint had peeled to reveal mottled gray beneath, and the glass of the lantern room reflected the last light like a watchful eye. This was the heart of her father's life's work, and the place of his mysterious death. Inside, the air smelled of salt and old oil. Elena's flashlight beam revealed walls lined with nautical charts and brass instruments dulled by years of neglect. Dust motes swirled in the cold draft. Every corner carried memories of childhood, the nights she had sat on the stairwell listening to her father's stories, the mornings when she'd watched him maintain the great lamp that guarded ships from the rocks. She climbed to the lantern room, where the view stretched endless over the darkening sea. There, a faint metallic clatter drew her attention to a loose panel beneath the floor grating. Kneeling, she pried it open to reveal a narrow cavity containing a waterproof lockbox, its edges rusted but intact. Her pulse quickened as she dragged it into the lantern's fading glow. Inside were neatly bundled journal pages, a weathered compass, and several folded maps marked with dense notations. A few pages of her father's careful handwriting were legible even in the dim light. One entry, dated a week before his death, stopped her breath. The Marlin's Pride cargo was not lost. Toxic containers sealed in the North Cove remain. They knew. They paid for silence. "I can't carry it any longer," Elena read on, heart pounding. The shipwreck decades earlier had been no simple accident. Her father had discovered evidence of a powerful company secretly dumping hazardous material along the coast, then disguising the disaster as a natural wreck. He had tried to gather proof, but someone, perhaps more than one someone, had worked to keep the truth hidden. A sudden sound snapped her attention to the stairwell below, a faint creak, deliberate and slow. She swept her flashlight toward the opening. Only shadows moved, but she felt the undeniable presence of another. Gathering the papers and maps, she slid the lockbox back into place and forced herself to breathe steadily. Whoever had followed her here might already know what she carried. Before leaving, she noticed an odd etching on the wall behind the lantern's base. The coordinates again, but this time accompanied by a single word carved into the stone: remember. The wind outside had grown stronger, rattling the lighthouse windows. As she descended, the sound of footsteps above confirmed she was not alone. Whoever lingered in the shadows was closer than she'd feared. Clutching her father's journals to her chest, Elena stepped into the gathering dark, the roar of the surf and the whisper of long-buried secrets merging into a single, relentless call. The night air outside the lighthouse felt heavier than the fog itself, dense with the metallic tang of salt and anticipation. Elena descended the narrow path toward the rocky beach, her father's journals clutched beneath her jacket. Every gust of wind carried the impression of a trailing presence, a subtle crunch of gravel a few steps behind. Halfway down the cliffside trail, a beam of light cut through the mist. A man's voice followed, firm and practiced. "You found something that doesn't belong to you." Elena froze. From the shadows emerged a figure she recognized despite the years. Victor Hale, a former town councilman, and once her father's closest ally in coastal conservation efforts. Age had silvered his hair, but his posture remained sharp, his dark coat blending with the night. "I thought you'd be smarter than to come back," he said, stopping a few yards away. His flashlight cast a narrow halo, revealing eyes that held both regret and calculation. "You sent the postcard?" Elena asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Victor gave a dry laugh. "If only. I warned your father not to dig too deep. Now you've done exactly what he died trying to avoid." Elena's grip tightened on the bundle beneath her jacket. "He died because of you, didn't he? Because he planned to expose the Marlin's Pride cover-up." Victor stepped closer, lowering the beam. "Your father was stubborn. The company behind that wreck still has reach. Powerful people. He wanted to release those documents, and I tried to stop him. For his sake. For yours. We settled it quietly back then. Don't make the same mistake. The words dripped with a practiced sincerity that almost masked the threat beneath them. The ocean boomed against the cliffs, punctuating the silence that followed. You call this settling? Elena shot back. The cove is poisoned. People deserve to know. Victor's jaw tightened. And what then? Lawsuits that drag for decades? A dying town stripped of its last industry? Sometimes the truth destroys more than it saves. She felt the weight of the journals, the ink of her father's handwriting still fresh in her mind. Maybe destruction is what's needed. His voice softened, almost pleading. Walk away, Elena. I can make sure you're left alone. But if you release those papers, you'll have enemies you can't even name. For a moment she wavered. The cold mist soaked her jacket, and the memory of her father's sudden death, officially an accident, flashed like a warning. Yet another image followed. Children playing on that same beach, unaware of what seeped beneath the waves. I'm not afraid, she said finally, each word deliberate. Victor sighed, an old sound of defeat. Then you're exactly like him. He stepped back into the darkness. I hope you're ready for what comes next. The beam of his flashlight vanished, swallowed by fog. Elena remained rooted to the path, heart hammering, until only the crash of waves remained. She turned toward the town lights below, resolve hardening. The journals felt heavier than stone, but their truth burned hotter than fear. Whatever came next, she would not let silence win. Morning broke pale and cold, the horizon a faint smear of gold beyond the restless gray sea. Elena had not slept. She sat in her small rental car overlooking the harbor. Her father's journals spread across the passenger seat like a deck of fragile cards. Each page carried the weight of a poisoned cove, a ruined ship, and a town that had allowed silence to settle like silt. She knew the evidence was explosive. Coordinates of the toxic barrels, copies of old shipping manifests, and letters implicating powerful corporate names still recognizable today. Her phone buzzed with a single text from an unknown number. Think carefully before you act. No name, no punctuation. A final warning. Elena's mind churned. She could mail the documents to investigative journalists she trusted in the city. She could hand them to the State Environmental Bureau. She could even upload them anonymously. But each option carried risk. Victor's words from the night before replayed with uncomfortable clarity. Lawsuits, economic collapse, and the possibility that those responsible would bury the truth again, only this time more ruthlessly. Determined to ground her decision, she drove to the North Cove one last time. The path wound through pine and salt grass until the ocean opened before her. Morning mist clung to the jagged rocks. Here, decades ago, the Marlin's pride had supposedly gone down in a storm. Her father's coordinates pointed to a sheltered inlet beyond the main beach. She followed them until she reached a tide pool where twisted metal just breached the surface. The water shimmered with a faint rainbow sheen. Oil or something far worse. Kneeling, she tasted the metallic tang in the air and felt her resolve sharpen. This was no abstract environmental hazard. It was visible, tangible, ongoing. Children still played near these waters. Fishermen still cast their nets a mile offshore. By midday, she was back in town, a plan crystallizing. At the small cafe where she had once spent her youth, she borrowed a laptop and connected to the public Wi-Fi. One by one, she scanned the journal pages with her phone and attached them to a detailed email addressed to two investigative reporters known for exposing corporate pollution. She included the coordinates, photos of the tide pool, and a concise summary of her father's death and Victor Hale's veiled threats. Before hitting send, she added a final line. This town deserves the truth. Protect the sources, the message whooshed into the cloud. An irreversible step. Outside, the wind carried the scent of the sea and the distant sound of church bells. Elena felt an unexpected calm settle in her chest. The threat of reprisal remained. She knew Victor would come looking, and that unnamed powers might push back. But the choice was no longer hers alone. The story now belonged to the world. As evening fell, she returned to the lighthouse. From its lantern room, she watched the beam sweep across darkening waves, just as her father once had. Somewhere below, the tide tugged at hidden barrels, but the silence that had smothered this coast for decades was broken. Elena stood at the railing, wind tearing at her hair, knowing the reckoning had begun and that her father's voice, his final plea to remember, had at last been answered. A single lamp burned in Elena's studio apartment, casting a warm halo over stacks of half-read books and a neglected mug of tea. Outside, the city droned in its usual symphony of distant sirens and murmuring traffic, but inside there was only the soft hum of her refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling wood. She liked the quiet. It made the rest of the world feel safely distant, as though nothing could reach through the thin walls to disturb her. Elena had cultivated this life with care. Modest job at an art supply store, evening sketch sessions, weekend walks to the neighborhood market. Each choice was deliberate, a gentle routine that asked little and revealed less. The people around her, friendly co-workers, casual neighbors, knew her as the quiet young woman with the wavy blonde hair and the faraway gaze. No one questioned why she kept to herself, and she never offered an explanation. That evening began no differently. She had just finished shading a graphite portrait when the mail slot clattered against the door. Expecting a bill or a flyer, she crossed the small living room and found a single weathered postcard on the floor. The front bore a black and white photograph of a rugged coastline, waves crashing against jagged rocks beneath a heavy sky. The back carried no return address, no signature, only a set of handwritten coordinates and two stark words. It's time. Her heartbeat quickened. The handwriting tugged at some deep memory, a familiarity she couldn't place. She read the numbers again. Latitude and longitude. Instinctively, she opened a map on her phone and entered them. The blue pin landed on a stretch of isolated coastline hundreds of miles north, the same area she had once called home. Elena sank into the couch, the postcard trembling between her fingers. That place was a chapter she had sealed years ago, after a summer of loss and unanswered questions. She had promised herself she would never go back, that the past could stay buried beneath the salt and the fog. Yet the simple message, "It's time," worked on her like a slow tide, eroding the walls she had built. Her mind drifted to her father, gone 5 years now, and the day she left that coastal town without a proper goodbye to anyone. Memories flickered, the scent of seaweed at low tide, the hiss of wind through pine trees, the hollow echo of the old lighthouse. Each image carried both warmth and ache, an unresolved pull she'd spent years resisting. She tried to dismiss the postcard as a prank or a mistake, but the neat, deliberate script refused to release her. Who would know those coordinates? Who wanted her to return? Outside, the city lights blurred in the gathering mist, but Elena barely noticed. For the first time in years, the quiet she cherished felt heavy, almost suffocating. The postcard lay on the table like a summons, its edges curling slightly in the lamplight. She told herself she would sleep on it, decide in the morning. Yet deep down, beneath reason and routine, a truth settled with the inevitability of the tide. Her carefully built stillness had just been broken, and the road back to the coast had already begun to take shape. Elena left the city before dawn, her decision made in the small hours when the silence of her apartment grew unbearable. The postcard's coordinates glowed faintly on her phone as if daring her to ignore them. She packed lightly, jeans, a weathered leather jacket, her sketchbook, and rolled her late father's vintage motorcycle out of storage. The machine had been idle for years, yet it started with a low, eager growl, as though it had been waiting for this very journey. The freeway stretched ahead in a dim corridor of sodium lights. Autumn fog clung to the pavement, muting the world to shades of charcoal and silver. As she accelerated, the city's skyline faded behind her, replaced by long ribbons of farmland and forest. The hum of the engine filled the spaces where thoughts might have been. For the first 100 miles, she focused on the rhythm of the ride, the shift of gears, the bite of wind against her cheeks, the faint scent of oil and cold earth. Yet memories seeped in uninvited. She recalled the last summer in her hometown, The arguments with her father about the family's crumbling lighthouse, the abrupt silence after a stormy night when something had gone terribly wrong. She had left before dawn back then, too, but with a heart full of escape, not return. By mid-morning, the sun broke through in scattered beams, casting long bars of light across the coastal highway. Elena stopped at a roadside diner for fuel and coffee. Inside, a television murmured about a missing person from the very county she was heading toward. The screen showed a grainy photo of a young man last seen near the old shipping docks. She studied the image longer than necessary, a chill prickling the back of her neck. Coincidence, she told herself, but the timing unsettled her. Back on the road, she noticed a dark sedan in her mirrors, steady and unhurried. It kept its distance, yet never fell completely away. Each time she slowed, it slowed. Each time she sped up, it matched her. Perhaps it was simply another traveler bound for the coast, but the persistence of its presence tugged at her nerves. The landscape grew wilder as the day wore on. Towering pines crowded the road, their branches knitting overhead like a cathedral of green. The air tasted of salt before the ocean came into view, an endless gray horizon merging with a sky heavy with impending rain. She pulled over at a cliffside turnout, the same place where she and her father had watched storms roll in when she was a child. Standing at the edge, Elena felt the vastness of the sea and the fragility of her own resolve. The postcard had summoned her, but for what purpose? She sensed that the answers lay not just in the town ahead, but in the spaces within herself she had long refused to explore. Behind her, a faint engine hum rose and then faded. When she turned, the dark sedan was gone, leaving only tire tracks in the damp gravel, a reminder that her journey was no longer solitary, whether she wished it or not. Late afternoon light slanted across the two-lane road as Elena descended into the seaside town she had once called home. The fog that hung over the cliffs seemed almost deliberate, like a curtain parting to reveal a stage she had fled years ago. Familiar landmarks emerged one by one, the battered welcome sign, the old cannery with its roof sagging like a tired sentinel, the lighthouse standing rigid against the wind. Each sight pulled at memories she'd worked hard to keep buried. She parked near the harbor, where fishing boats rocked against their moorings and the air smelled of brine and diesel. The town looked unchanged, but a subtler shift ran beneath the surface. Storefronts she remembered as cheerful were now shuttered. The wharf's once vivid paint had dulled to a weathered gray. It was as though time itself had slowed here, waiting for her reluctant return. Her first stop was the small cafe where she had spent countless teenage afternoons sketching seascapes. The bell above the door chimed the same bright note, but the woman behind the counter stiffened when she recognized her. "Elena Vance," she said, voice laced with surprise. "Didn't think I'd see you again." "Just passing through," Elena replied. Though even to her own ears it sounded like a lie, other familiar faces surfaced throughout the day. Old friends greeted her with a warmth that carried a faint edge of curiosity. Some asked about the city, others carefully skirted the topic of her father. When she mentioned the lighthouse, a hush often followed, like the closing of a door. It confirmed what she already sensed. The town still carried the weight of that final stormy night 5 years ago, when her father's sudden death had ended her world here. Seeking answers, Elena visited the local historical society, a cramped room behind the library where records of shipwrecks and storms lined the shelves. Mr. Harrington, the elderly historian who had known her family, adjusted his spectacles with a tremor of recognition. "Your father's girl," he murmured. "Back at last." She showed him the postcard. His brows rose when he read the coordinates. "That's the North Cove," he said slowly. "The site of the Marlin's Pride wreck. Nasty business decades ago, cargo that was never accounted for, whispers of a cover-up. Your father spent years researching that place." The name struck a chord. She remembered overhearing late-night arguments between her parents about the Marlin's Pride, though the details had blurred over time. As she left the society building, dusk had deepened into an eerie violet. A solitary car idled near the corner, a dark sedan, engine purring softly. She recognized the silhouette immediately. The same vehicle that had shadowed her on the highway. Her pulse quickened. Whoever had sent the postcard was not the only one aware of her return. The town, with its fog and faded memories, had never been as quiet as it seemed. Elena pulled her jacket tighter against the chill and started toward the lighthouse path. The wind off the sea carried a faint metallic scent, like rust or old secrets. The past was no longer distant. It was breathing down her neck.